To install the trigger group, you'll need your bench vise, the lower receiver vise block, a nylon brass hammer, and a number 3 roll pin punch. This diameter punch will work for all the trigger and hammer pin sizes. If you're installing an aftermarket or non-standard trigger group, be sure you read and understand the directions provided and test the trigger group according to the manufacturer's recommendations. First, install the receiver onto the vise block and rotate it so you can clearly see down the lower receiver. Place the trigger spring under the trigger with a solid loop of the spring under the front of the trigger, and then pull the loops over the trigger pin extensions. Place the disconnector spring into the hole provided in the top of the trigger with the flared end of the disconnector spring first, followed by the disconnector. The hook of the disconnector should be facing forward, and it should line up with the hole in the trigger. Place the trigger with the disconnector installed into the lower receiver. You'll have to align the trigger pin with the pivot point of the disconnector to allow the trigger pin to pass all the way through and complete the installation of the trigger assembly. You can maintain alignment with your punch while you push in the trigger pin until it's flush. Next, install the hammer spring onto the hammer. The closed loop will rest against the back of the hammer, and then pull the loops of the hammer spring over the hammer pivot points. Place the hammer into the receiver and push it down until it aligns with the hammer pin holes. The tails of the hammer spring must rest on top of the trigger pins. Use your punch to hold the hammer in place once you've aligned it. Push the hammer pin in until it's secured by the J-spring in the hammer. You may need to lightly tap the pin with a nylon-tipped hammer to fully seat the pin into the receiver, but be sure the pin is properly aligned with the holes in the receiver so you don't cause damage to the lower receiver. We have to install the safety selector before we test the trigger. We'll demonstrate the testing of the trigger in the Installing the Safety Selector and Pistol Grip segment.